told that we'll. There we go. Progress. I think progress she meant, but there we go.
He's American.
Yeah.
So, well, who was it who said
Sorry,
it?
Marsha.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not Marshall. Martin.
No, I said but never mind.
Somebody said it gets you started in the High Holy Days mood. I think that was Shirley. However,
What was that?
could say we start Selichot very late because Sephardi communities begin reciting Selichot, a particular set of prayers, at the beginning of Elul, so that you have 40 days of Selichot prayers, all of the month of Elul, plus the 10 days to Yom Kippur. Now, when I say Selichot prayers, sometimes people get a bit confused. So if you get sent and asked to do a reading in the Shabbat, in the Yom Kippur service, you'll often be asked to read the Selichot prayers from page 312 to 320. And you'll say, hang on, have I just been asked to do something on Saturday night before, or have I been asked to do, or what? Because Selichot is a section also of every service on Yom Kippur. And Selichot comes obviously from the same root as the Hebrew word slicha, which is what you very rarely hear on a bus when somebody pushes you out of the way, or in a queue in Israel, but they ought to. It's only the British people who say slicha, slicha as they try and get onto a bus. But anyway, it means pardon, pardon me. So these prayers of pardon, if you're a Sephardi Jew, you will have been praying for 40 days. So you got started a long time ago, back in early August. Why 40 days of these prayers? So now, good luck. Why 40 days? This isn't what Ashkenazi Jews do. Go on.
One day a year. 40 years they were in the desert, and so
I love that. 40 years in the desert.
one day, one prayer per day, per year.
You are so close, Shirley. You're really, really close. You're very, very warm. Go on, Kevin.
Is it the 40 days between Moses going up Sinai the second time and he comes down on Yom Kippur after the golden calf?
Absolutely, that's right. That's where this comes from. Absolutely. So it's out of imitating Moses, the time that Moses spent on Mount Sinai praying prayers of forgiveness. That's the idea. And so therefore we emulate Moses, just as we say, Ad me'ava esrim, may we live to 120, and we have those prayers of forgiveness. For Ashkenazi Jews, though, and this is the practice that we adopt, we begin to say them on the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, after Shabbat. So that's your first direction towards midnight. If you've got to do it after Shabbat, and obviously when they're in August, which is unusual, we're talking about, actually the film start time we'll have Havdalah, then we'll start the film, because we'll need to. And so whilst we said come along at 8:30, that's for a bit of a drink or whatever until we start the film at once Havdalah has been done. So we have to do it late at night, otherwise you couldn't do it at all. Okay. So it's to begin saying them on the Saturday night prior to Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so what's wrong this year? Go on.
You're meant to.
Go on, Brian.
Rosh Hashanah is early in the week.
Yeah, it's next Sunday night.
Tuesday.
So why are we not doing it the day before Erev Rosh Hashanah? Basically, it's out of kindness.
Oh, I thought you had to say it 4 times. I thought you had to recite Selichot 4 times, once in the evening, and then 3 more times, and you couldn't do it because Rosh Hashanah is so close.
Yeah, there are various editions about. You see, we see Selichot as a service. It's not really. It's a beginning of a sequence of adding prayers of Selichot to your morning service. Okay, so in theory, you will do prayers of Selichot in your morning service from that Saturday night onwards, except there's some points at which you don't, etc. But I'll come to that later. So if there are fewer than 4 days, exactly as Kevin has said, before the beginning of Selichot and Rosh Hashanah, then the prayers happened the week before. So that's why we have this very unusual August Selichot this particular year. Okay, so you've got to have 4 days for exactly the reason that Kevin said, so that you've got time to say them in the daily prayers. The conclusion of the Shabbat is a time to do it because it's the beginning of a new week, and it's the end of a time of a sacred day of rest and study. Originally, these Selichot prayers said early in the morning, prior to dawn. Okay, and we're talking about 5 in the morning. If we did our Selichot according to the tradition, and Sydney and Sylvia, lovely that you've come to join us. If we did our Selichot prayers at 5 in the morning, how many members of EHRS do you think would turn up?
Not me.
Well, I almost believe, I think this particular crew probably would, but I think we'd be on our own. And I'm not convinced all the choir would be there either. Okay. So, the custom in East, yeah, go on, Kay.
I was just going to ask you, is it not connected to, I think it was Rabbi Akiva who was praying with his disciples, or whatever you call them, all night long, and they said, it is morning, or something towards the end.
No, you're in Pesach.
Oh.
You're thinking about the 5 rabbis on Pesach.
That's
Rabbi Mark time to recite the morning prayer.
Yes,
but you're not, again, a bit like Shirley there, you're pretty warm. You're very close to it, because the way that it would work in the shtetl in Eastern Europe is that the Shliach Tzibur at dawn time would make the rounds of the village, knocking 3 times on each door and saying in Yiddish, Israel, holy people, awake, arouse yourselves and rise for the service of the Creator. So that's what should be happening at dawn time if we kept the original thing. So you'd be driving around Bushy and Boreham Wood and knocking on people's doors and knocking on Marsha's flat and going down to Devon. I don't quite know how we managed that. And saying, right, come on, everybody, it's 5 o'clock, time to get up. However, it became common practice in the 19th century to hold the first Selichot service at a time more convenient for the masses of people. And that's why the Saturday night service was moved forward to not 11, but midnight. So we cheat a bit, in fact. We make sure, and it's pretty typical Reform and Liberal practice, that our service goes over midnight a bit.
10 minutes.
It's actually meant to start at midnight. And many, quite often the United Synagogue mass Selichot, because most United shuls don't put on a Selichot. What they do is they have a kind of a group one for North London and a group one for East London, which are absolutely glorious, because they are very, very, they're because all the synagogue choirs together and things like that. But they normally start a little bit before midnight and go on till 1:30 in the morning. So again, I'm afraid we Reform Jews, we do it correct. We go over into the dawn time, into the time that it's okay to begin to say these prayers of Selichot, but only by 10 minutes or so, and then we go to bed. So that's how it ended up at midnight. I'm afraid it's because people did not want to be woken up at 5 in the morning for Selichot prayers anymore. So that's how it started. Okay. What I'm going to do now is just to show you a little bit about what the content of Selichot is. Looking again at the group that's here, most of you know this pretty well, but do feel welcome to stop me if anything seems a little bit unclear. What I do need you to do is to shout out, because once I'm sharing the screen, I can only see 4 people at a time. So this is our Selichot service and how it starts. We begin with Psalm 134, which is our evening prayer to say it's night time. Kol Ovdei Adonai ha'omdim beveit Adonai beleilot. We're all standing here at nighttime, Psalm 134, which is the nighttime evening service psalm. We have some creative prayer to explain where we are, and then we get this first greatest hits of the High Holy Days. And again, we can share this a bit. For me, this is always so meaningful when the choir for the first time sings Ve'al kulam Eloha Selichot. And you hear that first sound of the High Holy Days for the first time. This is, again, creative prayer. There's no rules as to how this should be done, but this is how we do it. Then we have an EHRS tradition to sing L'chuna Ranana Ladonai, a particular version of this for Selichot, which continues with these beautiful words, Hanshama lach, v'haguf shelchach, husa al amalach. The soul is yours, the body is your work, have pity on your labor, as in what we realize we're in trouble. For the sake of your name, O God, forgive our iniquity, for it is great. Using the words of Job and using the words of Psalm 95. In God's hand is the soul of every living being and the spirit of every person. Beautiful ideas and beautiful words, very typical to Selichot. Now let's move forward until we go to the first one we're going to fully study. So Selichot is not a formal service, and you'll find there will be differences in what happens in a Selichot service in different synagogues at different times, etc. And it's made up of these things, Piyyutim. And to be a Piyyut, you need to be a poem which was created for liturgical use, for use in prayer. You need to have been written probably during the Middle Ages. There is such a thing as modern Piyyutim. You're written by a paitan, that's a person who writes a Piyyut, and you were not in the original prayer book, Seder Rav Amram. Now, I say Seder Rav Amram because that was published in the 9th century, and that's our general source for what our services basically are. So you were written, if you want to be a Piyyut, get yourself written sometime between the 9th century and about the 15th century. Once you begin to get Kabbalistic works, they don't get technically called Piyyutim anymore, and get somebody to include you in the liturgy. As long as someone includes you in the liturgy, you're okay. Once we got to the Kabbalistic times, and that's basically, although Kabbalah went alongside Judaism for hundreds and hundreds of years and even thousands, Kabbalah really flourished in the 16th century. And one of the things the Kabbalists did was get rid of loads of Piyyutim from our services, and they substituted their own songs. So on Shabbat evening, what is the first Kabbalistic song that we sing in shul? L'chadodi, absolutely. They kicked out a whole load of Piyyutim, stuck their own L'chadodi in. But these Piyyutim have a major life during our Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah services. They are the poems which have a lot of meaning, and they can be very beautiful. So in fact, the three pieces we're going to look at now are all technically Piyyutim. One is called a pismon, it technically in Aramaic, which means it's a liturgical poem that never made it into a regular statutory service. Now you may say, what on earth does that matter? Well, what it matters is you won't find it anywhere else in Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah, except in EHRS, because we use some of the Selichot stuff in our second day of Rosh Hashanah, but I don't think that gives them the status of Piyyut. So there's basically different levels of liturgy. There is our Talmudic Mishnaic liturgy, that's like the Amidah. There's the use of the Shema, etc., Baruch Hu, things like that. There's the Piyyutim, which were these poems which were written in the medieval times in order to be within our prayers. Within the prayer that we have on Yotzer, the prayer for the daytime, there's El Adon, which we don't tend to use very much in our shul, but that's a Piyyut, for example. There are a few of them around. Then the next level is Pismon, which means that they never got included in regular liturgy, but you do find them once in a while incorporated into what we would call non-statutory services. So they're not festival services, which are statutory, you could say, and they're not Shabbat services and daily services. I hope that's making some sense. We all right? We know what a Piyyut is, so let's go and see the first one, which I suspect you'll be very familiar with. And it's beautiful. It's this one. As clay in the hands of the potter, to be molded and shaped at his will, so are we in your hands, O God of love. Look upon your covenant and not our imperfection. So this is the one which we sing like this. I can't sing the first line because that's very cantorial. Ki Hineh CaChomer b'yad hayotzer b'rotzoto mechav u'b'ritzito mekatzer ken anachnu b'yadacha hesed notzer lavrid habed b'al tefen yetzer. Not sung perfectly by any means. What I'd love to do now is to play you a version of it. And what I've done for each of these pieces is I found a different style of singing of them. So let me hope that I'm going to be able to get this up, and it should work. So here we go. So this is by an Israeli group called Banot. And you'll tell me if you can hear it, I hope.
ברצותו מרחיב וברצותו מקצר, כן אנחנו בידך חסד נוצר לברית הבט ואל תפן ליצר. Hineh כאבן ביד המסתר, ברצותו אוכל וברצותו מחכה.
So it's a lovely piece, and one of the things with it is you'll notice that it just keeps repeating. So Ki Hineh CaChomer always is a repeating song, because that's the way that it works, and that enables us then to join in to the chorus. So it's very deliberately written that way. But let me tell you a little bit about this and how it got there. As clay in the hands of the potter to be molded and shaped at his will. Look at the next verse. As stone in the hands of the mason to be saved or shattered at his will. As iron in the hands of the smith to be held in the flame or held back at his will. As a tiller in the hands of the helmsman to pull or ease at his will. So are we in your hands, O God of forgiveness. Look on your covenant and not our imperfection. We carry on. As glass in the hands of the blower to be cooled or melted at his will. As cloth in the hands of the weaver to be plain or patterned at his will. As silver in the hands of the smelter to be fused or refined at his will, and back to as clay in the hands of the potter. So this really gives you the date, doesn't it, in some ways? These are all the skills of a town somewhere in Spain, I would say. We don't actually know who wrote this, unfortunately. We do know that it appears in liturgy from about the 13th century. So this is 700 years ago. And of course, it's all the artisans. So I want you to imagine Cordova. Let's put ourselves in Cordova. And I suspect that's not far off where this was written. It would have been Cordova, Granada, somewhere probably in southern Spain, because of where it begins to appear in the liturgy.
Like the guilds?
Sorry?
Are these like the guilds?
That's, oh yes, absolutely. That's a lovely way of putting it. It is, yes, absolutely. All those with a skill, a marketable skill, and which makes a difference to something. But where does it come from? Well, this Piyyut has its origins in a particular verse of the book of Jeremiah. So here we go. Jeremiah chapter 18. When you spot this Piyyut, tell me, right, got it, gotcha. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. I'm going to read a bit of Jeremiah. When you spotted it, tell me you gotcha. To Jeremiah from God, saying, arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I will cause you to hear my words. So I went down, Jeremiah says, to the potter's house, and behold, he was working at the potter's wheel. And the utensil that he made of clay was spoiled in the hand of the potter. So he made again another utensil, and it seemed good to the potter to make. Okay, why is God sending him to a pottery? There's no wrong or right answer, by the way. Why is God sending Jeremiah to a pottery?
He can observe the difference between making a bad pot and a better pot or a good pot.
Yeah. Okay, so are we good pots? Are we bad pots? What are the kind of pot you put on a potter's wheel and it gets all floppy all over the place? I think I'm one of those quite a lot of the time, actually. Okay, so Jeremiah is sent to see this potter, Jeremiah 18. Then the word of the Lord came to me saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you just as this potter does? Said the Lord, behold, as clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. Okay, you spotted it, I hope. There we go, that's it. That's what this is based on. It's, although there's a change that the Piyyutim makes to this. If at any time, says God to Jeremiah, I shall speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, that I will pluck it up and I'll pull it down, then I will destroy it. If that nation against whom I pronounce turns from its evil, I will repent of the evil I intended to do to them, and I will not destroy it. So what's the image here of God as a potter? It's God who's getting fed up with the pot he made, basically, and saying, right, put that one back in the water. Okay, this is not quite what the Piyyutim did with this verse, is it? And by the way, the words in the verse of Jeremiah, if you want to look it up at some point, it's Jeremiah 18 verse 6, is Hineh CaChomer b'yad hoyotzer, identical to the verse in the Piyyut, but then it goes, Kain athem b'yadi Beit Yisrael, whereas what we say, Kain anachnu b'yadcha, as in we're all like in the hands of the potter. And then the genius of the poet, of the Piyyutim, was to say, well, you know, there's an awful lot of professions like that, aren't there? There's the masons who build. There's the smiths who hammer iron. There's the helmsman even just steering the ship, yeah, who can do it one way or another. Glass in the hands of a glass blower. Has anybody have a go at that? It's really difficult, especially to get it not to be wonky, although Nicola managed it. I was amazed. I couldn't. Cloth in the hands of a weaver. I know many of you work with cloth in one way or another, or have done over time. And, you know, you have a choice, plain or patterned at your will. Silver in the hands of the smelter. So there's a bit of poetic genius, I think, that idea to pick up Jeremiah in the 13th century and say, what about all the other skills around me? All the other guilds, as somebody suggested. However, our sages in Midrash didn't really like this image in Jeremiah. So in a Midrash on Jeremiah, there is this. Israel said, Master of the world, this is what you said to us. As clay is in the potter's hand, so are you in mine, O house of Israel. This is why, even though we are sinners and fill you with anger and exasperation, don't leave us, because we are the material and you are the maker. Okay, now look where the rabbis go in this midrash. We are the material and you are the maker. If a maker created a jar and left a tiny stone in it, when it came out of the oven, it would drip and leak. But who caused it to leak and lose its contents? You, the potter who made it. Brilliant idea. It's not our fault that we do all these awful things. You're the potter. You're the one who made the mistake. I like that. Human beings are like clay in the potter's hand, formed from dust by God, who breathed life into them and gave them independent souls. When else do we have this image of clay in a potter, in God's hands?
Creation of man.
Exactly. How is man created? From Shomeir, same word, from the dust of afar haaretz, from the dust of the ground, and then made like clay into Adam, and then the breath of life is breathed into him from Genesis 2. So between the lines, the poet here is saying that God made us living things turning us from objects into vessels, from substances into subjects, and we're complex. So we almost demand that God, because God is our creator, preserve God's kindness and look to the covenant, as in, you made us, God. That's what this Piyyut is all about. It's basically saying, please help. Don't blame us so much. So are we in your hands, O God of love. Look on your covenant and not our imperfection. We're not jars to be smashed. So what a beautiful image in this Piyyut. I think it's just one of the most beautifully constructed pieces of poetry in the canon. Now, we'll also, by the way, hear this in our Yom Kippur evening service. So that's why this is a Piyyut, because it also appears in the Yom Kippur evening service as well as in Selichot. There is another few things that's really clever about this, which is, okay, here we go. I'm going to see if you can pick this up. Good luck, everybody. This is the kind of thing I reckon that that Brian might manage. I think we'll see. Let's see. Okay. Where is it? It is. We've got Yotzer, Musateh, Harash, Malach, Mazgeg, Rokaim, Soref. Essentially, although we don't completely preserve it, all of the professions are listed alphabetically. So there's one more little bit of how it gets put together. Now, when you make a Piyyut and you list things alphabetically, why would you do that? There's something which is important about listing things alphabetically in creating a Piyyut. What's the idea?
Help you remember them?
Yeah.
As an aid memoir.
It is an aid memoir. You can remember them absolutely, because 12th century, not everyone's got a book. Yeah.
It's
So
in
really
order.
helpful.
It's in a proper order.
I like that. It's in a proper order. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in a way, what that order tells you is we include everything. And there may be many professions that aren't listed here, but since we've got as many as we can possibly do, everything in between is also part of it. So that's often the idea. That's why the acrostic form is so common in Piyuts. They go Aleph to Taf, and the next one we're going to study will be like this. A little bit more about this. So each stanza, each verse refers to a master craftsman of some particular craft as a metaphor for God, who therefore, so if you are a master craftsman, how responsible are you for your work?
You want it to be the best?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really are completely responsible.
Yeah.
So a lot of this Piyyut, which is the first one that we hear, is all about God, we're here on Selichot, but you're actually responsible for this. You're responsible for us to be here. So do us a favor, okay? Anyway, so each one affirms the raw physical material of man has no value until it's formed by God into humanity. So we are perpetually in God's hands. Now, many of you will know their spirituals about, you've got the whole world in his hands, and Christianity picked up this verse from Jeremiah as well. And that's where that image actually comes from, the whole world in God's hands.
Mark,
Okay.
just interrupt
So
for a
God,
minute.
yeah.
Can I just interrupt? Are you following it from the Old Testament, what you're reading? Because I've got an Old Testament Bible in front of me.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Jeremiah is from the Jewish Publication Society translation, which is the one I tend to use.
But this is just the Old Testament.
Yeah, so it'll be, each translation is a little bit different. Yours will probably be the Revised Standard Version. What
It's
does
an old. It's a old
when it's
one, I
18,
expect.
Jeremiah 18 verse 6, what does it say?
I don't know. What it is.
There'll always be
I had this as a
slightly-
child, so it's an old one.
Oh, that's not, no, well, don't worry.
I follow it.
Many of us
follow
have
it generally.
Lovely. Anyway, so we look at God through this poem, through this Piyyut. It's a God of loving kindness, of support, of forgiveness, etc. And we ask God to be mindful of God's covenant with the Jewish people and to overlook the cracks in the pots, which is us. So we're the crackpots, or whatever it might be. Rabbi Louis Jacobs had a wonderful observation on this. I think it's beautiful. So many of you may know Rabbi Louis Jacobs. He was the founding rabbi of Masorti Judaism and died just about 15 years ago. He said, you know, even the most skilled master craftsman relies on the worthiness of his basic raw materials. So basically, we are saying that we have to be worthy material for the smelter, for the silversmith, for the mason, etc. So there we go. Well,
and the goldsmith. And the goldsmith.
A goldsmith, yeah, but they don't get mentioned, I'm afraid. We don't get in there. Silversmith, I don't think not sure many people could afford the gold in those days. Now then, the next one is about a century younger. And again, a beautiful part of Selichot. Let me just take you on and show you the next one I'd love to share a bit more about with you. So we've had Hineh CaChomer, as you can see here. Then we continue with another Piyyutim, more of those. Then Ribon Ha'olamim Ve'Adonai Ha'adonim. This is the prayer which talks about what is our life, what is our justice, what our success, what our endurance, what our power. Then we have a study passage. These are study passages we're going to use this year. A few more creative pieces around confession, modern poems. There are psalms that we say, this one in particular, which is about God examining me, this idea that you know who I am. Look how short is the span you give me. For you, my lifetime is as nothing. And now we have a song by the Hebrew poet Rachel. So again, not traditional material, which we will sing. And then comes the next piece of Selichot, which is one of those things that we absolutely have to make it a proper Selichot. It's this piece, B'motzei Menucha. The last Shabbat of the year is ended. In this brief time, we bring you all our praises. Though you seem so distant, beyond all praise we can offer, hear our songs and the private prayers within them. Lishmoa el HaRina, the El Hatfila. So what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to play you this, and I suspect anybody who's keen on Selichot will definitely recognize this one. The version I'm going to play is being sung by Viv Belos at Elith, and is really, I think, a very beautiful version. I'll play you a little bit of it. What I've got to do now is just get it. Trying to get, there we go. Where is it? The music at Elith one I need. I'm just going to work out how to get there. That's it. Aha, that's the one I want. One more verse. Okay, so there we are.
Beautiful.
It is always beautiful, and I think we normally have Mark sing it, Mark Feiner, and it just suits his voice so perfectly. It's always beautiful, and that refrain, Lishmoa el HaRina ve'el hatafila. It's a refrain, but nobody ever feels they should join into it because it sounds so beautiful in the cantor's voice or the Chazanit's voice. Let me tell you about this now. Just as what we discovered about the Hineh CaChomer, of course, this again is not coming out of nowhere. It comes again as a biblical quotation. But where from? Where is, here are songs and the prayers within them. Where does it come from? Well, I'll put you out of your misery. It's from King Solomon opening the temple. Very obvious, isn't it? You know, the first time we have this huge public prayer. From 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 28, for those who wish to look it up in their Bible. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 28, but I'm going to start at verse 20. Solomon said, God has performed his word that he spoke, and I've risen in place of David my father. I sit on the throne of Israel as God promised, and I built a house for the name of the Lord God of Israel. And I've set there a place for the ark where the covenant of the Lord is, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. And Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the congregation of Israel and spread out his hands towards heaven. So I want you to imagine that. There's Solomon standing there. The temple's just been built. It's opening night, and he's got his hands out spread towards heaven. And he said, Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you, in heaven above or on earth beneath, who keeps covenant and mercy with your servants who walk before you with all their heart, who's kept with your servant David, my father, what you promised him. You spoke this with your mouth and you fulfilled it with your hands as it is this day. Therefore now, Lord God of Israel, keep with your servant David, my father, what you promised him. Say, there shall never fail you a man in my sight to sit on the throne of Israel. So your children will listen to their way. They may walk before me as you have walked before me. And now, God of Israel, let your word, I pray you, be confirmed, which you spoke to your servant David, my father. Okay, so this is basically the first prayer that Solomon offers in the temple is, I want to stay on the throne and I'd like my son to as well, please. Thank you very much. So never mind. Now he continues towards what we actually need to hear. And now, God of Israel, let your word be confirmed. Will God dwell on earth? Behold, heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain you. How much less this temple that I have built? Yet have regard for the prayer of your servant and for his supplication, O Lord my God, and Lishmoa el HaRina ve'el hatfila. Listen to the cries and to the prayers which your servant prays before you today. So it's the first prayer offered in the temple. So that's why that refrain is picked for this. So when it's said, I want you to imagine when you hear that being sung, whoever the Chazan or Chazanit is being, they are being Solomon with their hands raised towards heaven, the first prayer in the first Jewish house of prayer. And it continues, that your eyes may be open towards this house day and night, towards the place of which you have said, my name shall be there, so that you may listen to the prayers which your servant will make in this place. Listen to the supplications of your servant, of your people Israel, when they pray towards this place. Hear this in heaven, your dwelling place. And when you hear us, forgive. So you can see how the Paitan who created that said, perfect, I'm going to make a whole song about that, and we're going to put that into the Selichot service. And look at how this song is structured. Let's go back into the song itself, Lishmoa. Here we go. So here it is. Again, look closely. What can you see? Apart from the very first line, which is the one which just says, we're here on the first evening after Shabbat, from the second verse onwards, what do you see, eagle-eyed among you?
Alphabetic.
Totally acrostic. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and then, of course, Lamed, because it needs to go Lishmoa, Dalid, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tek. It's completely acrostic all the way down, okay? All the way down to the Taf at the very end. Reish Shin Tet. Now that's quite a feat of creating. And it's all about listen to us. We're frightened to meet you, fearing your judgment, trembling and uncertain like a mother giving birth. What an image. Unless you remove our sins, how can we face your wonders? Let's go down a bit. If the sins of your community are too great, then only you can give us the strength that comes from you. Give us blessing as we journey to meet you. Go on to another page. Accept our prayer as we stand here night after night. Receive it like the sacrifices and offerings of the past. So in the last section, of course, what the Peitan is trying to do is link it back to that temple image of Solomon with his hands up. Let us see this wonder, for you alone have such power. Lishmoa el HaRina, the el hatfilah, hear our songs and the prayers within them. Again, I think it's a very, very beautiful piece of poetry, and so carefully and cleverly constructed. Let's go to our last one. Now, the last one, again, pretty well known. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it before I play it, because it's got a surprising role. And here we go. Let's go to it, first of all. So then after we have had Lishmoa, we have El Melech Yoshev Al Kisei, God is sitting on God's throne. And then Shema Kolenu, please listen to our voice, don't send us away from you. And then we have out of the depths, Mima Amakim Karitach Adonai, one of the Shir HaMaleot, a psalm. Then we do our confession, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibanu, Dofi, which is also acrostic, Aleph to Tat, basically to say, we can't list every single sin we've done, but if we go Aleph to Tat, to Tet, to Tav, we're going to get everyone. We'll get every one of them somehow. And then we have the Al Kulam, the sin we have committed against you. So this is called Vidui, all of this section, which is our confession, our witness statement that we confess, the Al Kulam, etc. And then when we have finished that, we celebrate a bit by saying, but yet we are your people and you are our God. As in we're saying, you're going to be all right, aren't you? We'll be all right. You're our friend. You're our keeper. You're our creator. Surely you'll help us out here. So we sing that. And then it's Avinu Malkeinu time. Of course, very important part of the greatest hits of the High Holy Days. And then the public prayers come to the close. But before they close with this piece, which again, many of you will know. Shomeir Yisrael, Shomeir She'arit Yisrael. Guardian of Israel, guard the remnant of Israel. Let Israel not perish who daily declare Shema Yisrael. Guardian of this unique nation, guard the remnant of a people who are one. Let this nation that stands alone not perish, who daily declare Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Guardian of this nation, guard the remnant of a holy people. Let this holy nation not perish, who daily declare Kedusha leKadosh, which is basically the Bishlush. We say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh 3 times. You're moved by prayer, reached by supplication. Accept our prayers and supplications of our troubled generations, because there's no one else to help. And then we go for a bit of the Avinu Malkeinu, we just sung, Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu Ba'anenu Kien Banu Ma'asim Asei Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. We don't know what to do, so we turn to you. Remember your mercy and love, for they endure forever. May your love be with us, for we hope in you. Have mercy upon us. Have mercy, for we've had our fill of shame. You know our nature. You know that we're dust. Help us, save us, and forgive all our sins, for such is your nature. Again, just a beautiful piece of prayer. Now, this is a piyyut which has a particular role, and it's not only said in Selichot. So here comes a question. When else is Shomeir Yisrael said? And you get a million points if you can answer this one, because it's not normally in Reform prayer, which makes it rather difficult to answer the question.
Is it in Yisco?
Good guess, but no. Very good guess. Okay. In a weekday morning service, in Orthodox practice, you don't finish with the Amidah before you go to the Aleinu. What you have in between the Amidah and the Aleinu is a set of prayers called, go on, Kevin, you go on, mute yourself.
Is it, I'm not going to pronounce this right, is it Tachanun or something like that?
He pronounces it perfectly. Exactly, Tachanun, which means prayers of entreatment. The idea is every day is a day of repentance, potentially. Why? This is in the words of Rabbi Eliezer. By the way, it's actually my Yom Kippur sermon, which I've mostly written. Why is every day a day for repentance?
Because we sin every day.
Possibly, well, or not. Because you never know which day is your last day, which is a horrible way of thinking, but that's why we do Tachanun every day, if you do Tachanun. And what it used to be in the earliest layers of prayer is you'd have the Amidah, you'd have Tachanun, and they would be kind of just personal prayers, things that anybody said. It was like a very extended period of silent prayer. And indeed, in Orthodox practice, normally that's what actually happens. You get the Amidah, and then everything falls silent for a while. And then Aleinu Shabbat L'Adon Hakol, because they tend to be read quietly or in an undertone. Anyway, in the end, as so often happens in Orthodoxy, fixed texts start to appear for these personal individual prayers. And one of them is this one, Shomeir Yisrael. In fact, it's the last one. You don't say Tachanun, by the way, on sad days. So fast days, you don't say it because you don't need to. You've got enough to be moaning about on Tisha B'Av, for example. And you don't say Tachanun on Shabbat or on festivals. Why would you not say it on Shabbat or festivals?
Because you're meant to be joyful.
Exactly. So therefore, we're not going to start complaining about, God, about being just a remnant of Israel and all that kind of thing. It's the wrong time to do it. And you don't say it between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Why not?
Same reason. It's a
Religious holidays.
Go on.
Again, you're supposed to be becoming joyful for.
Exactly. It's enough already with all this confession and things like that. And also, you don't say it during the entire month of Nisan. Why not? It's joyful month. Simple as that. Springtime. It's not the right time to be doing this. So there we are. Okay. You don't say it on Tisha B'Av. And you don't say it in a house of mourning during Shiva. Why not?
Not a joyful occasion.
No, it's enough sadness around. So you don't.
I was going to say that because you're already really wallowing in sadness.
So there's enough woe. No more woe, thank you very much. You don't say it if you're a bridegroom on the day of your wedding.
No.
Fair enough. And you don't say it in a synagogue where there's going to be a Brit Milah that day. All right. Or in the presence of anybody who's just had a baby. So the idea is that you're just careful with this. This has to be really sincere at the right time. And in some congregations, you don't say it on the yard site of any of your rabbis. And again, I think the idea is that the congregation has a certain sadness already, so let's not say it then. And you wouldn't say it on your own on a yard site that's significant to you either. Okay, so there we are. But this poem is part of that Tachanun. It's in fact the last one that if you did do the Tachanun thing, you would say it every day apart from all of those that I've said, you don't say it. And what's it all about? We've just got to the end of this service and we have just said, God, we're really, I'm sorry we haven't done terribly well. We've confessed our sins, but all these things we've said, there's little merit in us at the end of Avinu Malkeinu. And what do we say? We say we are just Sha'arit Yisrael. We're just the last ones left of Israel. It's kind of saying, look after us, God, come on, we're the only ones left. Honest. please look after us. And what have we done to deserve it? Look at the words here. You know, every day we say Shema Yisrael, just like we're supposed to. Every day we say Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Look at the second verse. We're a holy nation, Goy Kadosh. Yeah, and we say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We say the Kedusha. There's no one else to help us. Look at that. L'dor oni ki ein ozer. You've got to help us because there's no one else to help. This is just such, I find this the most poignant piece in this piece. We do not know what to do in Hebrew, but anachnu lo neida ma na'aseh. We don't know what to do. So we're turning to you. This is an appeal to God. Help us out, please. And then what happens? We blow the shofar, of course. And then we have that very meaningful end to Selichot. And the blow the shofar is almost to say, we're here. And then in theory, as Kevin said, these prayers of Selichot can be then said on the next few days on the way to Rosh Hashanah. And that is it. But let me just play you a version of Shomeir Yisrael. This is by the Shabbaton choir, which has a beautiful, beautiful sound. Unfortunately, in the EHRS and EDRS and Hendon CDs, they didn't record this, so I've had to find other people's versions. So my apologies to Kay and her fellow choir members that I couldn't find their own version of it, but hopefully I have got it here somewhere. Where is it? There we go. Shomeir Yisrael live. Oh, where's it gone? No, I've hit the wrong button there. So it's difficult to get a good sound over Zoom for this, unfortunately. But if you look up Shomeir Yisrael, you'll find some beautiful arrangements of it. And of course, it's very mournful because it's saying we're the last ones left. And when you get, this is always sung just about at midnight for us because it's the last thing, yeah? And by that time, we do feel a little bit like the remnant. We're the last ones left, the faithful who are there at the end of Selichot, making sure that we come into Rosh Hashanah ready and prepared. So that's three pieces of for Selichot. Just going back into the service again. How does it all finish off? We have the sounding of the shofar. We have the Kaddish, of course, and we also tend to conclude with an Adon Olam as well, because it's nice to sing something together. But actually, traditionally, you finish with the Kaddish, and indeed the Kaddish is often part of the Shomeir Yisrael arrangement. So I hope I'll see many of you on Saturday night. It's either in shul or, and there's a lot of people booked in, which is lovely, or alternatively, we will of course be playing it so that you can pick it up at home through our live stream as well. Unfortunately, we can't play the film through the live stream because of copyright, and it needs to be, so that one does need to be in person. But the Selichot prayers will be. So any questions, any comments, anything that you're wondering that we haven't covered tonight?
I'm just pleased that you did this because it sets up the, Saturday presentation myself.
Thank you, Marcia.
So you can,
It was just very, very moving. It was
Yeah.
all, I mean, the last piece makes me cry when I sit there
Yeah,
anyway, totally. And I just really got that feeling just now that it is happening. It's sort of, despite the world going round us, this is going forward as normal, if I'm allowed to say that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
And I can hear Mark singing it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I heard him sing it as well. It's
Yeah.
fun. I just sit there and cry. The minute he opens his mouth, I sit there and cry. So
He is a really very, very talented cantor. And I think also one of the things that he gets across, and also Robert, when it's him singing it, is the pleading nature of these pieces, especially Shomeir Yisrael. As clay in the hands of a potter, that one, Hineh CaChomer, I think that's quite positive. That's saying, look, we're in your hands, you made us, come on, give us a break. And that's why actually it's quite a nice, quite upbeat, la da 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 da, and lovely. I love the image of Solomon in the temple, the very first prayer to be offered, the very first time, the very first moment the temple is answered is Lishmoa el HaRina el HaTefillah, which I can't sing anything like Mark, but let's imagine he had a good Levite next to him singing that so beautifully. And it's, please let this be a place where you listen to our prayers, and whether you're going to be with us over the High Holy Days at home, or whether you're going to be with us in the synagogue, in some ways, I think singing Lishmoa el HaRina almost blesses the place and says, we're going to do our best together. And then, as you say, Femet, Shomeir Yisrael is the one which says, there's just us left. We don't even know what to do. I'm really sorry, God. I wish we did. We don't know what to do. Come on, help us out. And no wonder we end up with tears in our eyes at the end of it.
That's true.
Anybody else? Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll close down for the evening.
Just been really insightful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, it was lovely to study with you all. I love Piyyutim. As you know, I also love Psalms and getting into it. These are not random, what we have in our prayer book. They have they're beautifully constructed, often with very difficult things, which is I've got to make every verse start with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet and for it to make sense. And the other thing, by the way, if you look closely at many of these, on Lishmoa el HaRina, something I failed to point out, but I'm going to point out for one moment, if you don't mind, is not only did the Peitan in the 12th century who created Lishmoa el HaRina do it with a acrostic, but just look at this aspect of it, which is amazing. It's not only acrostic, but he got every last syllable to rhyme. La, yil, 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 echa, 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 tsa, tsa. Amazing. I don't know how you do that. Every first letter has to be one that you have no choice, and every last syllable has to rhyme as well. So
like
that
poetry, isn't it?
it is Piyyutim of extraordinary quality. That one, lovely. Kevin,
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think a Shamni, where it's got the 22 letters or the 22 starting letters, so it's the acrostic, do you think that was inspired by the book of Eicha, by Lamentations, when it said you have, Israel, you have sinned with every letter of the alphabet?
So there are quite a lot of psalms that use that same construction. So it seems to have been a Jewish way of poetry, really all the way back from 10th century BCE. So it's in the Psalms. A lot of them are structured that way. I think about 10 out of the 150, something like that. Eicha is indeed absolutely, in fact, it's a repeat. It's a 3 times through. It's quite amazing, actually. And the third time it goes backwards, which is quite incredible. But yes, I suspect that that's all influenced together, because notice how these Piyyut are basically built on verses. They're not built at random. You start with, you want to be a Paytan, start with a verse from the Bible somewhere. So they are absolutely mining old traditions. Brian, we need a noisier Brian, not a silent Brian.
In the American Machzor, there is one translation of that as an alphabet of woe.
Yeah. Oh, like that. Alphabet of woe. Ooh. There's also, by the way, the Holy History in Musaf on Yom Kippur afternoon is entirely alphabetical as well, which tells our history from Aleph to Taf, because it can't have everything. So therefore you go from Aleph to Taf. So there's many uses of this as a way of saying we can't include everything. So we do the best we can by going from Aleph to Taf. And there is a Kabbalistic interpretation. We've got to stop because we're way over time. But there's a Kabbalistic interpretation, which I think is beautiful, from the very first words of the Torah in Hebrew, which are Bereshit, Bara, Elohim. What's the next word?
Lasot.
Lasot.
No. Bereshit, Bara, Elohim.
I thought it was Lasot.
We are very, very lucky. We have a whole bunch of wonderful Tanakhs now that we can use. So if we were all together, we'd be opening them up. I'd say Genesis 1:1.
Bereshit Elohim et Hashemayim.
Stop. You've just given us 10 words.
Oh, sorry.
Start again.
Elohim.
No, Bereshit bara Elohim. Next word, please.
Et.
Stop.
No.
Et. What's that?
Act.
Translate it.
2.
It's completely untranslatable. It's actually grammatically, it's the sign of the direct object. What did God create? The heavens. If you're a Kabbalist, you say, oh, no. It's the letters Aleph to Taf. Because without creating Aleph to Taf, you can't write the Torah. So first thing God created was the Torah, because God created the alphabet, which therefore means whenever you want to try and represent everything, just go from Aleph to Taf. Now, they did that idea well after acrostics had already appeared in Jewish poetry, but they said that was the reason why acrostics began to appear, is because God had to create Aleph to Taf before anything else. So there we are. We're going to have to stop there. So I just want to wish you Shana Tova U'Metuka.
Shana Tova. Thank you very much. It was wonderful.
You're hugely
Thank
welcome.
you.
And see
Keep
many of you
well.
on Saturday night, either in person or virtually. Be lovely to see you and speak to you soon. Bye, Sydney and Sylvia. Bye, Naomi and Kate and David and Marcia and Kevin and Yvonne and Dawn and Fimet and Shirley and Benita. And Kito, goodbye to you as well. And we're going to stop the recording here.